Hello. It's come to my attention that some people find the subject matter of skydiving exciting. So I decided to tell the story about my first AFF jump and then compare it to Airborne school that I did later on. For those of you who don't know, my stepdad is a world-famous competitive skydiver, and his actual paid job was to skydive 8 times a day, every day. So from the age of 5, I was indoctrinated on most knowledge related to skydiving. And for the most part, I consider it to be a very safe activity. When I was a freshman in college, my roommate was just ridiculously enamored with skydiving. He had never done it before. He thought it would be incredibly exciting. And when I told him who my dad was, he really wanted to meet him. And so during Christmas break of my freshman year, we went and we took classes from my dad for like a day on how to do a freefall jump. And then we went out and did our first jump. I found the act of jumping out of the plane for the first time to be incredibly easy. When you've been psychologically indoctrinated since the age of 5 to think of skydiving as perfectly safe, it doesn't really even hold any excitement. The one thing my dad didn't mention in all those years and all his stories is how much the wind would hit your face. I was just like maybe he didn't think about it, but then maybe after all those thousands and thousands of jumps, like his facial muscles just got better at contracting and controlling themselves during extreme wind. But yeah, the wind hitting my face really hard was something that I noticed. And then when we got to the right altitude, my chute deployed, and we coasted down to the ground. Now, you have like a little radio in you, and there's normally a person on the ground who's trying to guide you in to the landing spot. And during the safety briefings, my dad had told me about with ram air parachutes, like you have these 2 cords on either side, and if you pull the cord, it pulls down the front corner of the parachute to help you steer. Well, some people have been either really excited or just really freakishly strong, and they actually pulled it so hard that they collapsed their entire parachute and brought themselves into a spiral. And so I was being overly cautious after hearing that, not to pull the cord too hard because I didn't want to collapse the canopy. And actually my turns were just going ridiculously slow because I was being too sensitive with that, and the guy on the ground wasn't happy about that. But yeah, that's something to be concerned with. If you're just like really excited, like you took 5 Red Bulls, or you're a competitive bodybuilder, collapsing the canopy by pulling down on the cord too hard is a concern. But if you don't meet those 2 categories, you really don't have to worry about it that much. They were designed to be used by humans. When we finally got down to the ground, it was a nice soft landing, and I met my roommate there, and he was just all excited. He was just like, yeah, this is so cool. And he wanted to know like why I wasn't excited after my first jump, and I told him, I was like, look, this is a very routine activity. The only difference is I did it for the first time today. Skydiving is an extremely expensive hobby. So if you're not getting anything out of it, there's really no point in investing in it. Now, at that time, my career goal was to become a Special Forces officer. So I thought it would be useful training if there was like a high altitude, low opening insertion later in my life. But you know, if you get to one of the units that actually does that, you'll probably do a lot of training with your unit. So you don't necessarily have to shell out a huge percentage of your limited paychecks on skydiving if you don't actually enjoy skydiving. 6 months later, I went to the actual U.S. Army Airborne School with the exact same roommate I had jumped with before. And there was a 2-week train up. It was pretty easy. And then the last week was jump week, where you do 5 jumps. Now, Army jumps are a lot different than AFF jumps, because at least at Airborne School you're doing something called static line, which basically means they unload an entire airplane at once. You have a static line attached to your parachute and to the aircraft, and as you leave the aircraft it automatically pulls your chute for you. Those are actually significantly more dangerous than free falling for 2 minutes and pulling the chute yourself. For most of my dad's career, he was on the Golden Knights, the Army's competitive skydiving team. But there was a period where he was on call to help investigators if a airborne fatality occurred on Fort Bragg. So he actually investigated the cause of quite a few of them. In a static line jump, there are a lot of ways that your buddy can kill you. Even if you do everything perfect, you just can't possibly avoid it. And that was the part that made me nervous. The night before our first jump, he called me on the phone and he gave me a 2-hour-long lecture about all these static line fatalities and injuries he had investigated. Some of the things stood out to me, like this one guy got pop-eyed. Basically, the guy in front of him was supposed to pass off the static line to the NCO who supervises the jump, but he was in a hurry. He didn't pass it off all the way. The other guy didn't grab it, and the next guy was coming out right after him, and the static line got wrapped around his arm. As he came out of the aircraft, it completely ripped his bicep out of the socket. He had to have major surgery. His arm never completely healed, and he had to leave the Army. So that's a concern. Another thing is, after your chute deploys, if people bump into each other too much, that can be a problem. There are a lot of cases of 2 people with deployed parachutes hitting each other, and then their cords wrapping up into a spiral until it collapses both canopies, and then they both just free fall to the ground and die. And then there was also an incident where multiple C-130s were dropping off troops at the same time. At Airborne School, you'll typically only be in one C-130, so you don't have to worry about that. But it was a night jump, and one aircraft came and dropped all of its troops. Then the other aircraft came right behind it, and dozens of the troops just got ate up by the propellers of the trailing C-130. So yeah, static line is a lot more dangerous. And what's particularly unnerving about it is, even if your skills are perfect and you do everything exactly the way you're supposed to, if someone else messes up, you can still die there. Since there was absolutely nothing I could do, it might have been better if my dad didn't have that conversation with me. But I went ahead and jumped anyways. And I tell you what, all those hours I spent waiting in the harness to jump and listening to the other soldiers made me a little nervous. Because I couldn't get any verbal confirmation from any of the other soldiers, with the exception of my roommate, that they even comprehended what they were expected to do during the jump. Namely, are you gonna pass off your static line correctly? And once your chute deploys, are you gonna be observant of the other parachutists around you and try to find a spot that's not near any of them? And yeah, I tried having conversations with the other airborne troops, and I couldn't get any verbal confirmation that they understood that they were supposed to do that. They were all really excited. They had this impression like they were waiting for their favorite rock band to perform at concert. And you know, I really have no fear of skydiving, but I'm easily frightened by stupid people. But yeah, we went, and all of the skydivers did manage to pass off their static lines correctly. And every time the chute opened, I was a decent distance from the other skydivers, and I would usually steer to whatever spot was least populated. And it went pretty smooth. I tell you what, for me, skydiving, the best part is after the chute opens. I like the really controlled descent of piloting your little craft. I don't really find the free fall that interesting. Thank you for watching another episode of SS Street Fighter. Leave a like, leave a comment, and click subscribe to join the Street Fighter army. I'd also like to send a thank you to my Patreon supporters, Charles and Nancy.